Moku Ang Thong National Marine Park.
Moku Ang Thong National Marine Park is a beautiful, unique set of islands off the coast of Thailand. It consists of 42 small islands with dry evergreen forests, beaches, and mangrove forests. It is home to a variety of marine and terrestrial animals and plants, including several endangered species and one endemic plant. Ang Thong Marine National Park was singled out as a protected area because of its importance in reef fish conservation, which allowed the preservation of reef seagrass beds and mangroves, which increased richness and biomass of the island. All of the islands in the National Marine Park are uninhabited and undeveloped except for one Pule. There are currently some indigenous people there who still make a living off traditional fishing practices within the national park. The islands were also previously used by pirates as a place of sanctuary, as the dense forest and caves made for good hiding spots. Additionally, Thai Marine created a training base on one of the islands, which ended up aiding in the creation of the islands as a protected marine park in 1980, though it was not officially declared a protected area until 2019. Moku Ang Thong was declared a protected area by the reform process and benefited from several IUNC guidelines. As the people who inhabited the island were not displaced when this became a park, there was little to no contesting of the process. The major stakeholders or actors involved with this park are tourists, local communities, one of the inhabited islands, as well as neighboring areas, the Thai government, as well as fishers and scientists.
According to the ASEAN Center for Biodiversity, Moku Ang Thong National Park is classified as an IUCN Category 2. It is managed for ecosystem protection and recreation and has been set aside for protecting large-scale ecological processes. Tourism and filming is allowed, and scientists also conduct research in this area. Recreation is a large source for income for the park as well as the neighboring communities.
There are several potential threats to this marine park. First, tourism and recreation, while very beneficial for the economy, can also pose some challenges when it comes to conservation. For example, The Beach, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, was filmed on one of the islands in Ang Thong. According to an article from EcoWatch, an organization dedicated to publishing science-based environmental news, there was a large amount of controversy over this being filmed there, as filmmakers disturbed the natural landscape to make it look more like the ideal paradise scene. Additionally, with such unique and fragile ecosystems, tourists that litter, use non-eco-friendly sunscreens and bug sprays, create social trails, and don't understand how to respect the park end up damaging it. The second threat to this park is climate change, specifically as climate change is driving ocean warming and acidification. Researcher Thong found that due to this warming and increased acidification, corals within the park have been experiencing coral bleaching. With this in mind, more researchers have begun to implement strategies that aim to protect and rehabilitate the existing corals in hopes of preventing extinction. Not only are the corals an important component of the ecosystem itself, but they also serve as a large source of income from snorkeling tourists. Finally, as described earlier, Ang Thong is home to a wide variety of flora and fauna, some of which are currently endangered or vulnerable. The threat of biodiversity loss, specifically from these endangered or vulnerable species, is currently being researched, and work is being done to protect the species. This work includes scientists monitoring the population sizes and implementing projects such as coral rehabilitation to maintain and increase population sizes and health. While all three of these are important threats to Ang Thong, the direct threat that we will focus on is biodiversity loss in regard to the coral reefs that surround many of the islands within the park. There are a number of coral species here, including elephant's tusk coral, brain coral, and staghorn coral. The largest indirect threat to the loss of coral is climate change, specifically with coral bleaching. As oceans are warming and becoming more acidic, the health of these corals declines, and the health of the marine ecosystem overall begins to decline as well. A significant underlying cost to this issue is human population growth. As the population grows, more resources are being used and more greenhouse gases are being produced. This abundance of greenhouse gases is resulting in ocean warming and acidification around the world, including in Ang Thong. Because of this, the park has had a history of issues surrounding coral reef health to the point where many of the reefs were becoming unstable. This has prompted the park to implement a number of management strategies over the last 2 decades, including constant monitoring, restrictive access, and creating zones based on coral health. This management has promoted a much healthier coral reef within the park, and many of these management strategies are still being employed.
Scientists and conservationists are working on various management plans that focus mainly on two things: enhancing coral reef resilience and effectively restoring coral loss. By measuring the amount of coral, scientists keep track of how well management plans are working. According to a study on coral reefs by the Coastal Resources Management Project, Thong is also taking steps to protect the corals from tourists. Thong uses many planning tools in their fight against threats. For example, specialized zones that designate some areas as being open or close to sustainable resource extraction, called management zones, are utilized throughout the islands. There are areas completely open to tourists, some only open to scientists, and some only open to local fisher people. Many tourist areas are classified in the ROS category as being semi-primitive, non-motorized areas. Use of motorized vehicles is pretty limited on the islands themselves. The big question is if these planning tools have helped. There have been many successes, as there is evidence that some of the coral reef management is working to restore them. However, there are still issues in regarding to tourism. Even though some areas aren't designated specifically for tourism, tourists aren't always respectful of that. Even in areas where tourists are allowed, there is still a number of environmental issues that can result from their activities. So while zoning is put in place, Thong can definitely improve the enforcement of it. There are a number of management principles that Thong utilizes. One example of this is the key management principle, which deals with threats that may require long-term activity. The Marine Fisheries Management Plan of Thailand from the Department of Fisheries stated that a management target is to restore critical habitat areas that are under threat. To do this, a 4-year plan was set in place to increase the area of marine protected parks. Thong has also enacted management principle number 8. Effective environmental planning process is to make a plan in Thailand to effectively restore critical habitat areas that split the goal into fourths. Another management principle that Thong has implemented is principle 9. The idea that effective community education will help to reduce threats of PAs has also been attempted. A marine and coastal conservation project in Thailand from a group called Global Vision International includes methods to educate the community to reduce threats, including sustainable tourism workshops and information stations in the community, and training in the tourist industry to be able to offer responsible and environmentally friendly options to tourists. Management principles in Thong Marine National Park are crucial to the survival of biodiversity of the marine park itself, because if the management in Thong Marine National Park did not value or protect the land or the marine life itself, the biodiversity would continue to decrease and die over time. If the situation was not handled correctly at all, the PA would probably be in much worse condition than it is right now. The reef would be lifeless, with few fish and sea creatures.
To conclude, Thong is a uniquely beautiful area and should continue to be protected and preserved.